has been a while, and let me start right off by saying pardon me for my prolonged absence and delayed in uploading anything new. I started a new job recently and it's been kind of kicking my ass, so hopefully that's a good enough excuse. However, today, and quite recently, I have a Maiden Voyage episode featuring the Russian Tier 10 heavy cruiser, the Moskva. And I had a feeling in space battles where this ship was featured and you could sail it, that I was going to enjoy it, and it kind of helped me to get grinding. So we will start with some of the modules, main armaments, because duh. Damage control, being that I imagine I'm going to be sitting a lot and taking some HE, I figure that'll help. Aiming systems, because always with cruisers, do you go with aiming? Well, almost always. Damage control system mod 2, to just bolster a little bit of the dot damage that I'm envisioning taking in this ship. Concealment, that's one where maybe there is some debate. It's kind of the same thing as with the Des Moines. I imagine I'm going to be spotted by all the planes anyway. But main battery mod 3 to increase the reload on these 220mm guns. All of the consumables are pretty standard. You have a 12-kilometer radar. But let's get to the captain skills. Priority target because, well, kind of like main armaments mod always. Expert loader. I have a feeling I'm going to be looking to use the AP on this ship a fair amount. Adrenaline rush, again, to decrease the rate of fire. Demolition expert. Well, because my guns are the big thing on this, and I want to be able to do as much dot damage of my own as I can. Superintendent, because all the consumables are valuable to have an extra one. Basics of survivability, again, counter to demolition expert to help undo some of the dot damage, and same here with fire prevention. Now you'll notice I did not go with any other 4 skills like concealment. Again, my logic is that with all the planes and the CV meta and everything, my concealment won't be that necessary. But probably with the last 2 points, I'm looking to get expert marksman, maybe high alert or jack of all trades, I'm not sure, but that would fill out for the 19-point captain. Check out the survivability, 6,500 hit points, pretty good for a tier 10 cruiser, 28% on the torpedo reduction, which actually isn't bad at all. Taking a look at the main batteries, I've gotten the reload time down to 9.1, and that's of course before adrenaline rush kicks in, which is pretty nice for these guns. It's got reasonable fire chance at 19%, and the AP damage is pretty good, almost 6k, but the shell velocity, that's a perk of all the Russian line destroyers and cruisers that is very, very functional, especially when shooting targets at range, and especially even shooting destroyers at range. Maneuverability, 34.5 is actually pretty decent, but turning circle, it's worse than a whole lot of battleships, and fortunately, the playstyle of this ship, you're not going to be looking to be wildly maneuverable or anything like that, so that kind of doesn't matter. Concealment, 15.7 again. I'm not so worried. I'm A, going to be behind a lot of islands, and B, expecting planes to be keeping me spotted for a lot of the match, so I'm thinking that investing in concealment might not entirely be worth it. So, as you can see, and as you probably did notice, it was pretty fresh out of the box. I had no XP on it. This is the very first random battle that I played. Now, maybe it's not entirely Maiden, because I did get a few battles in the space battle counterpart, but as we all know, the space battles wasn't much to accurately assess how it would perform in randoms, considering everything. So we are, as hasn't been a surprise, we've got a couple midways, and I think a lot of people are using their midways as much as they can before 8.4 comes out, because 8.4 is going to introduce a couple of nerfs, and you have an argument against some of the nerfs, in my opinion. However, there was one major one, and in fact, I've said this to a bunch of clanmates, that in my personal opinion, all you really had to do was in some way nerf the HE bombers of the Midway, and that would kind of put it back into balance, and that has happened in part. The targeting reticle on the HE bombers is thinner, which means, unfortunately, enemy battleships, you're not going to notice too much difference. They're still going to be able to do about 15 to 20k in a single attack run if you're not careful or don't have friendly AA to help out a little bit. But for destroyers, and this was where my major concern came in, as long as you're able to be very mindful of when the bombers have you targeted and do everything in your power to get your ship turned perpendicular to the drop, you will not as often see those absolutely devastating 10 to 15k HE bomber salvos, which, along with a lot of other stuff, it's not been very fun to play high-tier destroyers since that. One of the other things that they did, now this affects all CVs, is they delayed the launch time. So at tier 10, I believe it's going to be 45 seconds from the beginning of the match until you can launch your initial attack wave. Which, yeah, okay, I can dig that. That's certainly something that's going to be valuable when it comes to competitive. But one of the other things they did, as many of you know, there was a speed boost glitch. It was something that made your bombers more or less immune to AA during an attack run, and they have minimized or eliminated that by reducing the speed burst time. You know what? Actually, I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to go into too much detail there without being positive. But either way, that exploit should no longer be the issue that it was. Now, I know this is supposed to be all about the Moskva. Bear with me, because not much is going on in this battle. We didn't have a destroyer on our flank, so pretty universally my team decided to go BC, and I wanted to take up a position to help our Jutland at B with my radar and protect myself with the island. One final thing on the CVs. This has reintroduced the Hakuryu as maybe the default choice for tier 10 CVs. It gives it an advantage now over the Midway in many or most respects. So with regards to the rant that I've been on about ranked season coming up, all of the stuff that I said about that is now off the table. I don't think all we're going to see is midways. I don't think necessarily you're not going to see destroyers anymore. But instead, what you are really going to see is a lot of Hakuryus instead. And I think, if people decide to play the way that I was predicting, it will lend itself a little bit to the Hakuryu and its stealth torpedoing, which that's been nerfed, but it's still potent. And if ships run around in blobs like I predicted, although I don't think that'll be as much anymore with the Midway nerf, that could be a very ripe target for Hakuryu torpedoes. So, alright, that's it. That's my CV rant out of the way. Let's get to the Moskva. Now, you could tell with my very first salvo on that Des Moines that I had kind of forgotten how absolutely fantastic the shell velocity was on the Russian ships. because I led him by a good half a ship length too much, and I think I only landed one shell right on his bow. That being said, this is, for me, a pretty solid position, given the makeup of the enemy team. Now, I am a little bit exposed. Wow, boy, the ideal position for me, not so much for that enemy Des Moines as our Kerfers takes him out. But I'm a little bit vulnerable to the enemies on the southeastern flank. But considering 4 or 5 enemy ships went towards A, and actually it's 5 because I know the DD's over there, putting this island right here allows me a fair amount of cover, and I can still cover a fair amount of ground with my guns. Like I said, in particular, my focus with this position was going to be primarily to help our Jutland at B, and he's in the process of capturing that now. It hasn't been contested yet, but also a solid defensive position against an enemy push from the west, which is formulating right now. As you can see, the Worcester is falling back, but there's quite a few battleships over in this direction, including the enemy Musashi. Now, the Worcester fell back, so I felt like I could probably push up here and at least start putting some fire on these battleships, if not outright deter a further eastward push by them. Now, the Musashi doesn't seem to be intimidated by my presence at all, which is fine. But you can see that the enemy Republic and what else is back there? The Montana are still kind of sitting back, which is not unwise. They're in a good position to defend A and put fire on any push coming from us on this side. Our friendly Montana and the Jean Bart seems to be poking out a little bit, and at this point, still, our team is doing very well. We're up 3 ships to 1. But my play in particular, nothing spectacular. Now, those torpedoes right there, I now know exactly where their enemy DD is. I don't know, well, maybe I could know which one it is. Fletcher or the Gearing. And he apparently has swung north. So at this point, I know he's fired his torpedoes, and our Jean Bart seems to be a bit on the yellow side, which I don't fully agree with the move, but I feel like the very least I can do is support him with my fire on the Musashi, and then any moment here, since I realized where that destroyer is, I was going to pop my radar and try and spot him out. Meanwhile, our friendly Montana that pushed south through B ended up finding a nice fat broadside of the Worcester and almost one-shotted him. Not quite. So as you can see here, like it's pretty heavily. We're doing all right as a team. My contribution has been largely negligible to this point. Though I do think, there it goes. Yeah, I guess if all else fails and you're YOLOing, go for the ram. But it's going to be indicative of the play style of a ship like the Moskva. It's not what I would call my forte. As many of you know, I'm much more accustomed to and a proponent of the play style more about the Hindenburg and the Henry or the Henri, where you're almost challenging people to shoot at you. Active maneuvering, staying at range, long range HE spam, where this reminds me a lot of the Des Moines in that you find an island, you give yourself some good cover, good place to use your radar, and you just try and farm what you can. It's at this point I notice B is being flipped and an enemy Jutland. So I am safe from the 3 battleships to my right. I start reversing to try and keep myself safe and start focusing on the enemy Jutland. I want to kill him if possible, but I certainly want to try and prevent him from taking B as that would, you know, we're 2-1 right now in the ship count department. We're holding pretty fast, but the caps and the points it's still close by those measures. So it became very important to me to try and discourage him from continuing his attempt at B. Thankfully, our CV lights him up again as my radar expired, and again, he's pretty much the only target that I am concerned about right now. However, I do notice the enemy Republic, and I do not want an enemy Republic showing up at that kind of range on my flank. So I start creeping forward a little bit, thinking he's probably going to continue after our Montana that's to the north behind me there. But like I said, I'm doing what I can to keep this giant island between myself and the Montana and the Republic, so that I can do what I can here to discourage this Cap and fight. And you can see the enemy start to make it a little bit close again. I lose sight of the Jutland, unfortunately, but hell, got 30 seconds left on my radar, so I'm hoping that might be enough time. And you can see through a couple of torpedoes at me. Very, very, very important, since the Jutland was the only threat on the only real direct threat to me. Keep your bows pointed at any potential torpedo threat. Now, that works in this case because I don't have to worry about my broadside to the battleships. But as a general rule of thumb, that's a very, very good thing to try and keep in mind to minimize, or in the case that you just saw, completely eliminate any damage that you can take from enemy torpedoes. So, a combination of my team's push out of sea and our carrier and my positioning here, we forced the Jutland out of B, and he was not able to cap it. So, considering that's the case, okay, yep, here comes the Republic. And at this point, it's like, nope, okay, forget the reversing, forget the safety, go, 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 go. I do not want him holding my breath right here. Don't be looking at me. Don't be looking at me. And I'm undetected at the moment, so I don't think he is looking at me. I couldn't tell from there. I get one little cheeky shot at him before I continue around the island. And that's when I notice, and forgive me, I misspoke before, it was an enemy Benson. I catch a glimpse of him for 2 seconds, so I decide, yep, here we go. He's close enough that I'll be able to spot him, and he was low enough HP that this kind of push, yep, there we go. There's finally, 13 minutes into the game, there's kill number 1 for me. I do have 50k damage, which isn't terrible, but what this has done is now kind of forced me into a position where I've got a Republic directly behind me. Oh, this is gonna hurt. Ow, 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 ow. But, somewhat surprisingly, I made note of it when we were still in the port. The 28% torpedo reduction really saved me there. That in combination, it was a Benson, so they're only tier 8 American torpedoes, but still, right there, I 1000% expected to die. I also, as you noticed, violated the rule I just made about facing torpedoes. Now, in that case, I was kind of crossing my fingers that he had already fired them at a different target. Also, had I turned and pointed my nose to him, this Montana would have certainly blapped me out of existence. So I kind of took a gamble. It ended up paying off as I kept angled to the Montana and somehow miraculously survived the torpedoes from the Benson. And there, I end up getting the Montana for my second kill. And almost 100k damage. Now, one of the other things you noticed there was at that close of a range, as long as I was looking at the flat broadside, I was using AP against that Montana. And no citadels, but did, well, 50k damage in a matter of a couple minutes and got the kill. So that, to me, right there,
legitimize the use of AP on this ship against enemy battleships, at least at ranges that are sub 10k. Here we go. Got the Jutland in sight again, and he looks like a one-shot. So if I can get a good salvo here... Yes, sir. There's kill number 3, and that one was very distinctly a kill secure. Even though I did a fair amount of damage to him earlier in the game, so maybe not entirely what I'd call a steal. But there you go. Put my nose towards... it's safe to go towards... Oh, broadside midway. Love it. But it's safe to put your nose towards the enemy DD, but in that case, what you saw me do is put my nose towards the position I figured he was in when he would have launched torpedoes at me. So it was slightly to the right of the last known position of him when I killed him. And it worked out perfectly. And there's 3 citadels, up to 121. Let's see about this. Oh, not quite one there. But there are a few things. I know I got a lot of people who concur with me on this. A few things in the world as gratifying as catching a midway like this and being able to reduce him to nothing in less than a minute. There's another 2 citadels. Kill number 4. And our team has got this pretty much in the bag. A couple of caps. Only the enemy Zao left. And it was not until this point, and actually, full disclosure, that was a nice citadel. Come on, can I get the Kraken? Can I get the Kraken? Oh, 3 ricochets? Yep, that would be how it goes for me. There's another 2 ricochets, and our Yamato finishes them off. So, no Kraken for me. But boy, was that quite a solid first outing in a ship that I already had a sound idea I was going to take to pretty well. 150k damage, 10k XP, which is nice. 4 kills, 8 fires, 6 citadels, which is nice. Obviously, most of those were on the enemy CV. Top of the team, 2300 base XP. Not bad. That'll make this ship... I mean, I already used the Kutuzov pretty heavily in naval battles, but this will make this ship a pretty valid contender there. So, getting to what I just started to say, I actually thought if I killed that Zao, that was going to be my 4th kill. I didn't realize until this point that was how close I came to getting a Kraken on my maiden voyage in the Moskva, but it wasn't to be. Either way, it was a very sound experience. It did start slow, and like I said before, I kind of anticipate this more stagnant gameplay to this type of ship. But one that I've gotten used to, and I'm quite comfortable with the Des Moines. Something I forgot to do in the beginning, take a quick look at the armor. Now, there was no joke. Now, it is not a Stalingrad, this ship, but there's some 25mm on the bow and stern, which it makes you vulnerable to some HE. But if you look at the deck, 50mm, and then all along your broadside, it's pretty decently armored. And I wouldn't even go so far as to call it trolley armor. I would just call it straight good armor. And that's why the jokes were made about these being less Russian cruisers and more battleships that fill a cruiser slot. And I've played a few games since this one, and definitely that's been my impression. As long as you use that priority target to its fullest and keep yourself angled to the most likely incoming fire, you can do a tremendous amount to mitigate damage. You really have a larger fear, maybe not larger, but a pretty significant fear from fires, which is true with most of the Russian line. And as you saw there, the torpedoes, So I hope you all enjoyed that first look at Maiden Voyage with the Moskva. Hopefully I'll see you very soon. This is Captain Happy, signing off.